You are listening to a reproduction of Uncle Sam's Radio Farm School from the United States Department of Agriculture in 1927. Disclaimer: do not assume content reflects current scientific knowledge, policies, or practices. This broadcast was aired on the 8th of October of 1926. Before we start this broadcast, the materials presented to listeners are available to you in the links below. There are two segments to this broadcast. The first covering dairy herd improvement, which can be found on page 2 of the document. Second is the production of clean milk, which can be found on page 30 of the document.
Uncle Sam's Radio Farm School will now come to order. This is the first regular Friday meeting of the dairy class. We are going to devote the first half of this evening's school to instructions on culling the border cows. Material is furnished by the U.S. Bureau of Dairy Industry. The lessons will be continued at this period every Friday. Enroll for the dairy course and you will be sent printed copies of all talks. Write either this station or the Department of Agriculture for an enrollment blank. We now introduce your schoolmaster, Mr. Professor.
I wish you would all come out to the barn of this successful dairy farmer with me. I believe it's best to talk cow talk out among cows. Then we can point out the good and bad features. The man who owns this particular dairy is very successful. When he first started, he had troubles aplenty. Some of his cows paid, some of them didn't. See that cow standing over there? No, not the one drinking from the water trough. Her appetite is better than her production record. That's my guess. You can't always tell by looking at a cow how many pails she'll fill. We'll run her record down in the herd book when we go back to the house. For all I know, she may be paying fancy prices for her feed. A few years ago, this particular dairyman started with just an average herd of milkers. He soon found that about 1/3 of his cows were star boarders. Another third just paid for their keep. The rest paid profits. In many dairy herds, the profits of the highest producers just about balance the losses of the lowest. The owner often comes out in the red at the end of the year. Another dairy farmer down the road from here started keeping individual cow records a year ago. He owned 14 cows. At the end of the first year, his records showed that only half of his cows were paying. The others were not paying for their hay and grain. It reminds me of the Hebrew-Egyptian story of the 7 lean years that ate up the 7 fat years. Those 7 border cows certainly ate up the profits of his 7 high producers. He has only 10 cows now, but they are good ones, and he's making money. The day the 7 boarders made their visit to the butcher, profits began on that farm. Close culling changed a losing proposition into a winning one. A dairyman who keeps border cows is in the same boat with the chap who paid $5 for a little pig, fed it $5 worth of feed, then sold it for $10. He said, "Of course, I didn't make anything on the pig, but I had the use of it for 6 months. Good business methods today don't permit feeding stock that just breaks even. It takes profits to make up the prosperity you can see around here. Border cows won't buy little Johnny new shoes. It took the owner of this herd a long time to find out just which cows were really paying for their board. It's not always easy to tell. This man began keeping records of their production. It wasn't long after that before he planned a little weekend trip to the butcher for 10 of the boarders. After he decided to keep records, he bought a substantial, low-priced herd book. In this book, he keeps the production and income records of every cow. He figures in the cost of feed, the age of the cow, the cost of labor, the weight and value of feed each cow eats, and her individual production as well as the price of her dairy products. He has been doing this for a year. He calls it his doomsday book because it dooms so many lazy cows. This is the way to keep the record. From the daily record of each cow, compute her monthly record. Then copy the monthly record in the herd book each month throughout the year. On the daily record sheets, there should be a space for the cow's name, number, her record, her sire and dam. Then there is a space for the quantity of milk she gives each day, the value of the milk at the regular market rates, the quantity and cost of the feed she eats. A complete record is there in that doomsday book. At the end of every month, go through the book and total and average the figures, and at the end of the year, draw up the grand totals. To stay in a good herd, each mature cow should produce in a year at least 6,000 pounds of milk and at least 240 pounds of butter fat. If she is a 2-year-old, she should produce at least 40 of 200 pounds of milk and 168 pounds of butter fat. If she is a 3-year-old, she should produce at least 4,800 pounds of milk and 192 pounds of butter fat. If she is a 4-year-old, she should produce at least 5,400 pounds of milk and 216 pounds of butter fat. You can't expect a young cow to do as well as a mature animal. If you're new at the record-keeping game, you'll likely find many of your cows are not paying their keep. As a rule, these cows should be replaced by high-producing young cows bred and raised in your own herd. Next week at this time, our lesson is going to be on selecting animals for the foundation herd. I want you all to be on time. Those who haven't already enrolled should send in their names at once so that a copy of all lessons can be mailed you regularly. Stand by now for the next announcement.
We are starting 2 dairy short courses tonight. The first on culling the border cow you just heard. All the dairy courses are prepared from material furnished by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Clean Milk is the title of the first talk of the second series on the general subject, milk production. Our lecturer will take you with him now on a little inspection tour.
Jim Doe of Bluefields thinks milk is clean when he can't see dirt in it. He thinks a microscope is something you look at the stars through. He has never looked through one himself, and so Jim is totally unaware of the wide world of life beyond the field of human vision. Jim has a lot of milk returned marked sour. Jim's milk floods the sour milk market. Sour milk makes lean profits. So Jim has done a lot of thinking in the dim watches of the night about this sour milk business. You see, Jim isn't scientific, nor very practical either. He doesn't know that bacteria make milk go sour. He doesn't pay any attention to dirt in the milk. He can't see the bacteria in there. He thinks he's doing the best he can. Let's take a look at Jim's place. It's just around that bend in the road. Here we are. There's Jim's old shed where he houses his 10 cows. Come on in. It is dark in here and pretty damp. In the winter time, I have an idea it gets cold. The place isn't at all roomy. Jim has to crowd his cows to get them all in. There can't be much ventilation because the windows are small and not placed right. He keeps his 10 cows in this place, and yet he could produce clean milk if he observed a few proper precautions. It really isn't so much the barn, you know, as it is cleanliness of containers, cows, and milkers. The reason why Jim's milk comes back marked sour is because he doesn't send it out clean and reasonably free from bacteria. You have to fight these bacteria even if you can't see them. Jim thinks it's a good idea to wash the milk pails, so he washes them in warm water and gives them a swab or two with an old rag that looks as if it had served in many such campaigns. He doesn't worry about keeping the cans clean either. The only cooling his milk gets is when it stands out on that platform there by the door while the men are milking the cows. As Jim doesn't cover the cans up while the milking is being done, considerable dirt blows into the milk. Well, that's the extent of Jim's efforts toward clean milk. Jim will learn someday. He can't hold out against better methods much longer. Now, to improve his methods and to get clean milk that would net him a decent profit in his dairy business, Jim wouldn't have to go to any great expense. He wouldn't have to build a big new barn and equip it with all the best devices. But he would have to do these things. First, keep his cows clean and healthy. Second, milk with clean, dry hands, and never let a person milk his cows when he is sick or carrying the germs of communicable diseases. Third, keep the milk containers scrupulously clean and sterilized. Fourth, use small-top milk pails. And fifth, keep the milk cooled to the proper temperature from the time of milking to the time it reaches the market. All those things can be done with a very reasonable outlay of time and money. Of course, better barns and equipment would help. They conserve time and save money. Time is money these busy days, but Jim can produce clean milk at a profit right here on this farm. I'm going to have the Department of Agriculture send him bulletins on the subject, especially Farmer's Bulletin number 602, Production of Clean Milk, and number 7443, The Feeding of Dairy Cows. Jim should know that there are men who have devoted their lives to solving just such problems as his, and that their advice is worth money to practicing dairymen. Jim calls the modern dairymen, who are making 2 or 3 times as much as he is with the same number of cows, dude farmers, because they use small-top milk pails, sterilize their milk containers, build good silos, barns, and dairy houses on their farms. Jim's going to wake up some morning and see a great light. He could learn from his neighbor, Dan Dibble, who lives down the road. We'll go down and see Dan's place now. Dan has a mind as open as a book. He believes in the best things, and he's willing to try things once when they are recommended by men he trusts. This is Dan's place. There's Dan himself out there, steaming out his milk buckets in cans. He keeps 16 purebred cows, and they average something over 11,000 pounds of milk and 400 pounds of butter fat a year per head. Hello, Dan. Don't mind if we look around a bit? I knew he wouldn't. Better come and go round with us, unless you're too busy. Notice how light and sunny it is in here. Dan has about 4 square feet of window glass to every stanchion, well distributed round the walls. Plenty of fresh air, too. Air you like to breathe. The walls are tight, so are the floors and ceilings. This place can be cleaned out easily, and it is. Even if it does get pretty cold in the winter, the cows must have lots of fresh, pure air. At the same time, they must not freeze to death getting it. See that ventilating system Dan has put in. His barn is comfortable and splendidly ventilated, even on the coldest days. You'll notice he keeps his barns and yards clean. The yard is graded, so the rain runs off. He hauls the manure off onto his fields frequently. When he can't haul it to the field, he puts it in a covered manure shed. Notice the water buckets? These cows have plenty of fresh, cool water before them all the time. You won't find many flies in here either. That's because he keeps the manure hauled out. Trapping and spraying also help. Flies are great carriers of bacteria. Keep them out, or better still, get rid of them. For years, Dan has been reading and talking a good deal about producing clean milk. He's sort of crank on the subject. He got a good many suggestions from county agents, also from officials of the creamery. They told him, first, the cows' bodies must be clean. Wipe them off before milking with a clean, moist cloth. Then, the milk buckets and all containers must be strictly clean and sanitary. Scrub them out in warm water and a good washing powder, rinse them, and then steam them out. After the milk is produced, it must be kept cool so the bacteria won't grow and spread in it. Bacteria grow slowly when the temperature is kept below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature goes up to 70 degrees, thousands will grow from a single bacterium in 24 hours. The milk should be kept at 50 degrees until it gets to market. You can't get pure milk from sick cows. If the cows have gargit, tuberculosis, or some other disease, the milk can't be pure. The cows all ought to be tested for tuberculosis at least once a year. If they are diseased, cut them out of the herd. This means more profit from better milk. The trade demands the best milk all the time. To stay in business, it's necessary to suit the trade. Dan decided this was a pretty sensible line of talk. He found that the relatively small amount of trouble and expense required to produce good milk is well paid for in dollars and cents. If any of you want more information on this subject, just write in to the dairy specialists in the Department of Agriculture. They'll be glad to serve you. Or get in touch with your state agricultural college and your local county agent. You ought to be in close touch with them all the time anyway. Next time I'm going to give you a close-up of another good dairy farm and some ideas you will find of much value. Remember to enroll at once in order to get printed copies of all dairy lessons. You're dismissed now until next Friday.
This show was researched and produced by BreakAway Empire LLC.